Well, welcome and thank you for attending our webinar this morning. My name is Jeff Cate. I'm founder and president of PremierPoint Solutions. We're a Microsoft Silver partner in application development and portals and collaboration. And we've developed SharePoint add-on software and provided advanced SharePoint training since 2003. We were formerly SharePoint Solutions, but we changed our name last fall to PremierPoint Solutions to reflect our expansion into some other areas in addition to SharePoint. This webinar will primarily be several live demos that I'm going to show you. However, I do have 5 introductory slides, and really those should only take a few minutes to talk through, but they are important to kind of set the stage for what you're going to see in the demo. The subject for today, I guess I didn't say that on the first slide, is to talk about how you can connect your Managed Metadata term store in SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013 to external line of business data. For instance, say you have a customer master file somewhere and you would really like to have customer names be available in SharePoint to use to classify documents with or categorize documents with, then how could you connect that customer master file to the Managed Metadata term store so that you can use those customer names as metadata values? And so that's the topic of this webinar today, and I'm going to show you a solution that we've come up with to solve that problem. So just a quick little background to level set, make sure we're all on the same page. Both SharePoint Server 2010 and SharePoint 2013, Server 2013, offer a powerful way to store metadata values in one place in your SharePoint farm. That place is called the Managed Metadata Term Store. And this slide is showing the user interface to maintain the metadata values. In this example, we're showing a term set named vendors. Presumably, the individual metadata values contained in that term set would be vendor names and could be used by end users to categorize and classify documents as they add them to SharePoint. If this were implemented, it would help make SharePoint more valuable because it would enhance document libraries and search. With large volumes of documents being stored in SharePoint, I think everyone would agree that anything that will improve our ability to sort, classify, and find documents is a good thing. As you'll see later, it's a very easy thing to manually add terms to a term set using this interface. But there are many terms that businesses would like to use as metadata values on documents that would be very difficult, if not impossible, to maintain on a manual basis using this tool. Vendor names is an example. You might have many types of business documents that you store in SharePoint that are related to specific vendors. An example might be a contract. Ideally, you'd want to assign a vendor name to a contract as a piece of metadata, as that contract is stored in SharePoint. The Managed Metadata feature of SharePoint allows you to set that up and make it available to end users in a very elegant and easy to use manner. But if you have hundreds or thousands of vendor names, how will you get their names into the term store? Furthermore, once they are in the term store, how will they be updated as normal add, change, delete activity occurs? Typically, business data like vendor names are maintained outside of SharePoint by some authoritative line of business system. In most companies, it is a system that is owned by the purchasing or accounts payable department. It might be a system such as SAP or Great Plains or a custom developed system. The ideal scenario then would be to automatically and regularly synchronize the vendor names in the line of business system with the SharePoint term store. Then normal add, change, delete business processes could continue to occur in the line of business application, but current metadata values would always be usable in SharePoint because of the automatic synchronization process. We've built a solution that gives you the ability to do this, and that's what I'll show you in just a few minutes. As an aside, Many of you indicated when you signed up for this webinar that your company is not yet using Managed Metadata in SharePoint 2010 or SharePoint 2013. Your company really should be if it's serious about getting the most value out of SharePoint. The Managed Metadata Service application in SharePoint 2010 and 2013 establishes a separate centralized database to store metadata terms. This database is called the Term Store. The database can be accessed by different SharePoint farms, different SharePoint web applications, and/or different SharePoint site collections. This gives a business the capability to standardize on a single set of metadata values across all of its SharePoint sites, which is very difficult, if not impossible, to accomplish with standard choice and lookup type columns. The diagram on this slide shows how multiple site collections in a SharePoint farm could use the Managed Metadata Service application to access the Term Store database for values that are given to end users to select from when adding documents to SharePoint. But back to the original discussion, there's an out-of-the-box gap with SharePoint in that there is no automatic way of connecting external business data with the SharePoint Metadata Term Store. Some of you may be asking about the Business Connectivity Services feature of SharePoint. Isn't that a way to connect external business data with SharePoint? The answer is yes, but the BCS doesn't complete the loop and synchronize the data with the Managed Metadata Term Store. So that's what our solution does for you. It completes the loop and automatically synchronizes a BCS external content type with your Managed Metadata Term Store. It does this with both SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013. Even though the little circle there shows TermSync 2010, we have the product available for both versions of SharePoint. And so with that brief introduction, I'd like to give you a demo of how our solution works. I'll be doing this demo using SharePoint 2013 and TermSync 2013, but all the features are exactly the same if I were using SharePoint 2010 and TermSync 2010. All right, so here I am on a clean machine, and I've got the TermSync product installed. It's got SharePoint 2013 installed on it. If you happen to have SharePoint 2010, that's fine. Our product here is going to show up in Central Administration. It's the Managed Metadata Term Store Synchronization product, and the feature set's exactly the same between SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013. So I had to pick one. I'm going to do this webinar in 2013, but rest assured that everything will look, other than the cosmetics of the user interface, everything will look the same even if you're using SharePoint 2010. So I'm up here in Central Administration. I also have a single top-level site created, and just calling that intranet home. Don't need anything really fancy or sophisticated for this presentation, just keeping it simple here. I also have my Managed Metadata Term Store created. I'm actually accessing this through Central Administration, but as you probably know, the Term Store tool in SharePoint 2010 and 2013 is very flexible, and it's possible to give subject matter experts access to this tool. So in your organization, you could give a subject matter expert access in the right URL, and they could get to this tool, but not the rest of Central Administration. You can also provide access to site collection administrators if you choose to, and they can get to this tool through site collection administration. Why would you want to do that? Well, over time, hopefully you have a lot of business terms in your term store, and you don't want a SharePoint Server Farm administrator to be a bottleneck in maintaining those business terms. So the term store was designed from the start to be able to delegate some maintenance of the metadata values in the term store. So I've created a group called Company-Wide Terms, and presumably what I'd like to do is, and I might be a subject matter expert in the purchasing or accounts payable area, I'd want to create a term set called vendors. Now that I've got my term set, I can come over to my intranet home, and I've got a document library over here, called contracts. And so I can come to this document library and I can add a new column to it. And I'm going to call this column vendor. And I can select the type manage metadata as the data type for the column. Now there's multiple ways to do this. I'm doing it kind of the one-off way. In a enterprise environment, I probably would set this manage metadata column up as at least a site column, but most likely I'd set it up as a column on a content type. But in this case, I'm just going to have a one-off column. Name of it's going to be vendors. It's going to be of type manage metadata. And then I can come down and I have a window into my manage metadata service, and I can either search or navigate, and I can tie this column to the vendor's term set. So I'm going to do that, click OK. And now with that, what I'm able to do is I can go File, create a new document. And then what gets added to my document is in the what's referred to as the document information panel is that manage metadata column that I've added to the library. And I can click on the browse button, and I see that there's a vendor's term set there, and presumably if I had a list of vendor names, I could select a vendor name and save this contract document. And then what I would have is documents in my contracts library that had been assigned metadata values telling everyone that visits that library and needs to sort or filter or for use in search, telling users what vendor that particular document applies to. Obviously, at this point, I haven't added any terms. We'll close that out. And if I go back to term store management and I add a term, like AAA cleaning. Very easy to add a term. I can add a description of the term if I need to. And I can also add other labels down here which can be used like as synonyms or other labels for that term. I'm not going to do that right now. So very nice, slick interface from the end user standpoint. Let me flip back over here real quick. If we go new document, and now very nice Ajax type ahead functionality. So it saw that I entered A, and it immediately is suggesting the only term in that term set, AAA cleaning. As a user, I select that, and this is our headquarters cleaning contract for 2014, and I save that. Close that out and refresh this. And so now I have a contract in here, and it's been tagged with a manage metadata value, which represents the vendor's name. So you can imagine over time, in most organizations, document libraries can get very large. Some organizations have moved towards centralized document libraries and have very large document repositories. You can imagine how helpful it is to be able to tag this information, tag these documents with things like this vendor name here. And you can see how easy it is. Probably everyone on the webinar already knows this, but you can see how easy it is from the end user standpoint. The problem, as we've already talked about, is how do we maintain this term store? Many companies would have hundreds, if not thousands, of vendors. It's not really practical to come in and manually add vendor names and keep those up to date and so forth. There needs to be some way to synchronize this term set, this vendor name term set, with a list of vendors that's probably maintained in an external system, such as a purchasing or accounts payable system. So let's look at that's what our term sync solution does. So let's look at that. So for this demonstration, I've got a SQL Server database, and it's the Microsoft test data called AdventureWorks 2008 R2. Some nice test data, and one of the things that they provide in here is a list of vendors. It's in a table called purchasing.vendor, and if I select the top 1,000 rows, I can see that this database, not that big. This fictitious company has 104 rows. We can see that there appears to be a business entity ID field, which is probably the key field to this table, and an account number and a name of the vendor and some other pieces of data in here. Presumably this is the master vendor database, and it's maintained outside of SharePoint by the purchasing or accounts payable organization. Presumably it would be maintained by in some line of business app here, and I've just created a quick and dirty one using Access. So this is just using Access as a front-end form tool. Is actually linking to that SQL Server table. So pretend that this is SAP or Great Plains or some ERP application that, and part of that is the vendor master maintenance. So we can scroll through that, and we can see down here at the bottom that those 104 records are in there. So now the question is how can we synchronize this data with the SharePoint term store, and also how can we do it on a regular automatic basis? Because we'd like for our normal existing business processes in terms of maintaining vendor information to just keep rocking along, but get the benefit of that data over in SharePoint. So TermSync does the job for us with that. To do that, we have a concept called synchronization points. So in general application settings, under the Manage Metadata Term Store Synchronization, you can click on a link, Manage Term Store Sync Points, once our product is installed. And this can also be done if you choose to allow it from Site Collection Administration. So sync points could be created there as well. For this demo, I'm just going to stick with Central Administration. So the idea here is that you'll see a representation of the term store and the different groups that you have set up in the term store and any term sets that you have there. In this case, we have the vendor's term set, and it actually already has that one term in it, which is not going to cause a problem. We'll leave that there. And what we want to do is we want to create a synchronization point here. So I click on Sync here, and then I can have to click and select an external content type picker. So prior to this demo, I had to set up a connection between SharePoint's out-of-the-box BCS or Business Connectivity Services to that SQL Server table, and that's called creating an external content type. And I did that with SharePoint Designer 2013. It's very easy to do. If we have time, I might show you one quick demo of how that's done. But plenty of articles out on the internet and probably some YouTube videos that show you how to create an external content type with Business Connectivity Services. So this is the external content type that I want, the AdventureWorks 2008 R2 content type. There's a screen here where I have to specify something called the Entities Finder method. Generally speaking, There won't be anything to select there, just need to default to the read list. And now at this point, what I've told this tool is what's my term set that I want to sync to, and what's the external content type that I want to use to sync. And so I have to create my sync point. It tells me that my sync point was created successfully. And now there has to be a mapping process. Back over here to my data, I have to decide what column in my data is the ID column. In this case, it's going to be this business entity ID column. And at a minimum, I have to decide what is the name column in the data that I want to map to the default label or name column in the SharePoint term store. So I'm going to click on Map Properties, and there's actually more fields in the term store that we can populate and map data to than those two. We're going to start simple here, and so we're going to use this name fields mapper section, and we have a column on the left for the external content type field, a column on the right for the term store field, and business entity ID is the key column in the external content type, so we'll leave that there. In the term store, the key column is the ID field, so we're going to map business entity ID out of the vendors table to the term store ID field. And then we're going to map name, the name column, out of the vendors table in SQL Server to the name column in the term store. And for now, we're going to keep it simple and save those mappings. And click Finish. So now we have a sync point set up. The question is how does the synchronization get kicked off? How does it run? Well, that happens with, like so many things in SharePoint, that happens with a timer job. So we're going to go over to our job definitions. And when you install the product, you get a term sync supervisor job. The purpose of that job is to look for new synchronization points and to create child timer jobs for each new synchronization point that is created. So I'm going to just click Run Now on this job. It's set to run by default every hour. Should run pretty quickly. There it ran and it succeeded. So now if we come back to job definitions, scroll down, we have a new timer job named Term Sync Vendors. So this is the job that it's also set to run every hour, but we're going to go ahead and run it now, and it's the job that will synchronize automatically on that schedule the vendor names from the SQL Server vendor table to the term store. So go ahead and run that. And we should be able to see that running in the run jobs. Should start up in just a second. There it is. And now we can cheat, and we can go over to term store management and hit refresh here while it's running, and probably see as it's populating data. So there we're already seeing some of those vendors coming in there. Let's see how the job's going. Looks like the job's finished. So it took 24 seconds. So pretty fast job. We only had 104 vendors that we needed to synchronize, so not a lot of work to do there. Now that brings up the point, though. The term store is capable of handling large volumes of terms. In fact, out of the box, the term store is supported to up to 1 million terms. So if you're a company that has thousands of vendors, then not to worry. The term store is completely ready for handling large volumes of terms. So anyway, we got all of our terms synchronized, and now if we come back over here, well, first let's find a good term. So let's say we buy something from Crowley Sport. Come back over here and we go to Files, New Document. And I start typing. There's my Crowley Sport. In fact, let's say if I just type C, you can see that it gives me a really nice type ahead that shows me all the vendor names with C. But I'm going to pick this Crowley Sport one. This is a leisure another contract. I'm going to hit save. And refresh that. So it works. We get our vendor name in there, and we get all the benefits later on down the road from being able to sort, filter, roll up, and search because we have a piece of metadata with the vendor name in it. Now, now let's go back to our scenario and say business happens and new vendors get added to our database. So let's add a new vendor. And I think we can just move off of that. And our vendor's added. All right. So now let's go back and run the timer job again. Give that a second. Looks like it ran, took 2 seconds. And by the way, we can come back over here and go to our Manage Term Syncs interface and go to our synchronization point and view a history. And we can see that the last run, we had 1 new vendor added. It ignored the 104 existing records there. So now, if we come back and do another document, should be able to start typing T, and there's our new vendor, Tom's Potato Chips. You get the idea. I could save that, but I'm not going to do that in the interest of time. You can see how we can round trip all this. There is also the ability to map a delete flag. What we can do is we can make him inactive here by putting a 0 in this flag field. Move off the record there. And then what's going to happen is if we run the job again, actually nothing's going to happen because I forgot to map the delete flag. So let me come back here. I didn't do that in the first time through. So I've got to go back to my synchronization point, and I've got to change my mappings. What I need to do is add a mapping between the active flag field in the data source and the is available for tagging field in the term store. So I'm going to click Save there. And now I'm going to go back and run that job again. Okay, looks like it ran 30 seconds really fast. And so now if I come back over here and look at the term store, what I'm going to expect to see is Tom to still be in there, but he'll be grayed out because he's not available for tagging. So that's in effect the delete. See, there's Tom's potato chips. He's grayed out and his little tag symbol looks different. And that's because his available for tagging box has not been checked. So now if we go back here and create a new document, and we type T, there is no Tom's potato chips in there because he's no longer available for tagging. So that's kind of how the deletion mechanism works. All right, let's do one more and then I will open it up for questions. And this time we're going to do something a little more complex. In this case, what we have in this database is we have a product database. And that has all our products in it. This one has 504 rows. And each product has what you think of as a foreign key field, and it relates each product to a subcategory. Some have subcategories if we scroll down here far enough, and some don't. So there's another table, because this is a relational database, that has a product category. So if we go look at that table, we see that our products fall into product categories. Actually, there's product subcategory. So when we were looking at products, we saw that a product is a member of a product subcategory, which is this table. Then product subcategories are members of product categories. So we have a classic hierarchical scenario here. Top level, a category called bikes. We have another category called components, clothing, and accessories. Within each of those categories, we have subcategories. So in bikes, we have mountain bikes, road bikes, and touring bikes. And then we have products that fall under that. So we have a classic one-to-many relationship between three tables and a hierarchy of data. Now, that's great because the term store supports hierarchical data. So it allows us to create a term underneath a term. This doesn't make a lot of sense what I'm doing here, but you get the idea. So we can create hierarchical data here. So the question is can our product synchronize hierarchical data? And the answer to that question is yes, it can. And I'm going to create a new term set called products. I'm going to come and create a synchronization point. And I have an external content type already set up. Go next, and create my sync point. And now here I have to do something somewhat different in the mapping. I actually had to do something different to get the data prepared. I had to write either a view or a stored procedure in my database so that my data is prepared in a single table with a hierarchical relationship. So in our documentation, we tell you how you need to do that. And the example we give is in that database, the table that you connect to the external content type, if you have hierarchical data, you need to provide a ID of the parent with no parent ID. In this case, it's kitchen. So an ID of 7 is kitchen. The child ID is 55. Its parent ID is 7. The child is sink. Hopefully you get the idea there. So we're not able to go directly against a relational database like this where we have 3 tables that are related and are typically joined together. But what you can do is have a stored procedure written in SQL Server or Oracle or whatever database you're using, or a view to combine these together and follow our documentation so that you get this data source table built right. And that's what I did prior to this demo. So I'm going to click on Add New, and my ID still goes with ID. Add New, parent ID goes with parent ID. Name goes with name, and that's good enough for right now. And I'll click Finish. And then I'm going to go over to my jobs. And I need to run my term sync supervisor since I have a new sync point. It would normally run within an hour, but we're going to run it now to pick up this new sync point and create a job for it. There we go, it ran, so we should have a sync point job for products. And so now we can run that for the first time. Here he goes, and he'll take a second to run. So he's got 500 or so records to synchronize. Not very many, so it shouldn't take but 20 seconds or so. But we can cheat again, and we can come over here, do a refresh. And there's our products term set, and so he's already doing some, and you can see how it's handling synchronizing hierarchical terms. A lot more stuff I could show you, a lot more demonstration I could do, but I think it's best to stop there. 1 or 2 more slides to answer some common questions, and then I'll open it up for questions and answers. So the licensing for this, it is an on-premises SharePoint 2010 and 2013 add-on solution. It's a farm solution, like many of the solutions you would buy from add-on vendors. It is licensed by the number of synchronization points, not by server. So the vendor sync point that you saw in the demo is an example of one sync point for licensing purposes. The product sync point would be a second synchronization point. So you can buy 3 packs of synchronization points, and they sell for $3,750. Don't have to pay per server. You just buy a 3-pack of sync points. It doesn't matter how many servers are in your SharePoint farm. It doesn't matter how many vendor names or product names you need to synchronize. It's just strictly based on how many sync points you want to set up. And in most cases, the definition of a sync point is some table in an external data source that you have data out of that table you want to synchronize with the term store. For enterprise customers that have lots of different sync points that they need to set up, we have an unlimited enterprise license for $14,995. And that's it. You can find out more about the product by emailing us or calling us. You can or visit our website at premierpointsolutions.com and just go to software products and look for the manage metadata synchronization area, and you'll find what you're looking for. Now I'm glad to answer any questions anyone has. Ty asks, how does the timer job play into overall SharePoint performance? Ty, there's good news, bad news. good news is it's not very resource intensive. Bad news is SharePoint's got a ton of timer jobs. It seems like a lot more get added every version of SharePoint. So I don't think that this particular timer job is going to impact performance in your SharePoint environment any more than the other 100 or more that Microsoft and perhaps other add-on vendors have added. Ty asked, can you also map with the synonym field, other label field? Yes. I didn't show that in the demo, but you can add as many synonyms or other labels. I think it goes up to 99 different other labels or synonyms. Ty says, if you had to uninstall our product, should that impact any terms that have already been synced? Absolutely not. It just means that synchronization wouldn't happen anymore. And then he asked about a yearly support fee. Is there one? Yes, we pretty standard in that regard. We charge 20% of the purchase price per year for support. Darlene says, if you start out with a 3-pack, can you upgrade to enterprise level later for the difference? Yes, we definitely will give you that option. Martin says, can this be used to create and manage navigation for across site collections? Yes, I'm probably the first person that is thinking of it in that regard. Of course, that would just be in SharePoint 2013 with the new managed metadata-based navigation. And so, yes, you would. The term store, really the enabler for that is that the term store in SharePoint 2013 and in 2010 is at the farm level. And so the term store can be accessed from multiple site collections, even multiple web applications, and even in really large organizations, there are multiple farms. And Stephen asked, can you sync with Oracle database table? That's an excellent question, and one that I want to make sure and make clear is you can sync with any external content type you can set up in SharePoint. What external content types can you set up in SharePoint? Well, if you use SharePoint Designer out of the box will let you create external content types that connect to SQL Server, to a .NET assembly, or to a Windows Communication Foundation web service. That's the 3 options with SharePoint Designer out of the box. Now, you can, with Visual Studio, you can create external content types to your heart's desire to connect to any kind of database that you can make a connection to through Visual Studio and an ODBC connector. If you don't have programming skills or can't get that done, that might be something we could help you do. If you're interested, another option would be SQL Server has a ability. I'm not a SQL Server administrator, but basically it can pass through to other database systems. So you can use SQL Server as sort of a linkage to an Oracle database. So the idea would be you'd set up, I can't remember the exact term, but there's a feature in SQL Server that lets you connect to an Oracle database or any other database and then expose those tables in SQL Server. So if you did that, then you could use SharePoint Designer to create your external content types. And here's what that looks like in SharePoint Designer. So here's my 2 external content types, and it's all GUI based, and if I want to create another external content type, I just click there and I start filling out the form and follow the instructions and make the connections, and then in the end I have an external content type that back over in SharePoint shows up in the BCS service application here. So these external content types are what I picked from when I was creating my synchronization point, but these were originally created by me using SharePoint Designer. Because it's easy, it's free, it's fast, and in my case I was using SQL Server as my data source, but again, if I had an Oracle database, I could have linked up SQL Server to Oracle and got the job done that way as well. And then Tyaz, just curious on the timer job with 1 million items. If it took longer and competing with those other jobs. Yeah, 1 million items is Microsoft's top end for the entire term store. So if you're thinking of 1 million items, you're pretty much pushing the envelope on the term store. And you may want to think of some other strategy to break things up into multiple term store databases, which would be a possibility. But like I said, we've tested a hierarchical synchronization, which is the most time intensive, with about 10,000 terms, and the initial sync took about 20 minutes, and then subsequent syncs, took 3 or 4 minutes. If you're talking about just flat term set, then I think that you could have tens of thousands, 100,000 terms, and it would sync very fast, probably within 10 or 15 minutes. Ed asks, can an example setup of an external content type connected to SAP be provided if you have already tested this functionality? That's a good question. Now, the thing to remember is that our product doesn't connect directly to SAP. It connects to external content types. So what we would need is an SAP database, and we would need to create an external content type in SharePoint to connect to that database and expose its data. All of that is out of the box SharePoint. There's nothing our product does or participates in that process. And external content types and the business connectivity services service application have been around since 2010, so 4+ years now. So there has to be numerous examples out on the web of creating external content types to connect to SAP data. So be glad to do that. I just don't have an SAP database available to show you an example of that. Martin Howell says, are you using path or host named site collection architecture? That would not have any impact whatsoever on anything I showed you today, because this all happens at the term store database level. Really doesn't have anything to do with site collections, because once the synchronization is done, it's SharePoint, whether you're using a hostname site collection or a path-based site collection, SharePoint uses the term store in the same way. So the answer to your question is supports either, but it really doesn't really have any impact on our product. Somebody asked about support resources. I didn't answer that question. So we have a professional full-time support desk, domestic-based support desk with highly trained engineers. And it's a Zendesk-based support portal. Our support portal's here. If you're a customer or if you're evaluating our products, you can come in and submit tickets. We've got some good guys working those tickets every day and helping people out. And then this product, both the 2010 and the 2013 version, are fully documented here as part of that support portal. So we kind of pride ourselves in having top-notch support and documentation, making sure our customers get everything they need and are successful with our products. Well, thank you very much for attending again, and everybody have a good rest of the week.